Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Easy Conversations podcast, a podcast about having easy conversations, where we talk about mental health, adversity, spirituality, and societal issues. I'm your host, Furkhan Dandia, and join me in this week's inspiring episode of the podcast where I engage in a candid conversation with the remarkable Zak Hussein. Together, we embark on a heartfelt exploration of our mental health journeys, discussing the choices and the paths we took to achieve inner peace and happiness. Zak is a Calgarian entrepreneur and a fellow podcaster. He reveals a pivotal moment in his life during the early days of the pandemic. Facing the pressures and uncertainties of the world's events, Zak decided to go alcohol-free to support his mental health. He shares the transformative impact this choice had on his well-being, and I'm hoping you'll gain invaluable insights into the power of making intentional decisions for the sake of one's mental and emotional health. Throughout the episode, we delve into the ups and downs of our mental health journeys, discussing the various tools and strategies we've employed along the way. This open and honest conversation is a testament to the power of vulnerability, resilience, and the importance of seeking help and making choices that promote mental well-being. Zak is a Calgary-based technology and digital media entrepreneur born in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, which is based in East Africa. He migrated with his family at a young age, making Canada home. After the loss of his mother and the challenges he faced with mental health and depression at an all-time low, Zak decided to go deeper within himself and get sober, which resulted in Zak needing an outlet as his social life had changed and loneliness occurred. In 2021, Zak decided to launch the Canadian podcast, which is a homegrown show that has its studio based in Calgary, Alberta. The Canadian podcast show highlights guests from all walks of life as they share their stories on what they have learned thus far to better themselves, their place of work, and the community in which they work, thrive, and live. Zak also talks about another initiative he launched in June of this year during the episode. And basically, it was around men's mental health, as June is Men's Mental Health Month. As an entrepreneur in the digital realm, Zak decided that the branding of the name would be Men-Tel Health, a passion project dedicating to fostering men's mental health awareness. Zak believes that as one, our community can come together and work together through the grassroots to help each other shatter the silence and erase stigma by encouraging open dialogue and empowering men to speak up about their struggles regarding their mental well-being. Please check out the show notes to find all the ways you can link up with Zak or to check out his Canadian podcast or mental health. And if you could leave a 5-star review or a comment in the comment section at the end of the episode, I would truly appreciate it.
And a brief word for our sponsors. So I would like to talk about deodorants because I'm tired of constantly replenishing my deodorant and then having to worry about disposing those plastic containers. There's a solution for that. Wild. Wild provides a eco-friendly, all-natural deodorant with a sustainable design. They provide a for-life aluminum case. For me, they sent me a personalized case with my name on it. And did I mention you can customize your orders and have these refills delivered straight to your door? This is an all-natural solution where there's no aluminum in the product, just in the case. Go to wearewild.com and use code EASY at checkout for 25% off your first order. All right, Zak, welcome to the Easy Conversations podcast. I'm really excited to have you on today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. We've been able to connect offline a little bit, and I've been able to kind of see the work you're doing and some of the movement you're starting here locally. So I'm really excited to share that with the guests today, the listeners today. But before we get started, I do want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself and some of the work you're doing, especially around Canadian podcasts. But yeah, what brought you here and what's Mentel all about. Just want to share that with the listeners.
Absolutely. Furkhan, thank you so much for having me. And I guess I could start off by saying wow, it's been a journey. Life is, it's never a destination, is it? Until the end.
Right.
So I guess for myself, it's been Ja- January 2021 for the Canadian podcast when I started it. Obviously, we're in a pandemic. I'm in a lockdown, and I needed an outlet because I also had stopped drinking in November 2020. So, you know, people our age, our social life is gone.
Yeah.
What do? You're alone. I have a little dog with me, but I try to speak to him. He doesn't speak much back to me.
Right.
And I said, let's start this podcast. Let's talk to strangers because I've been a very visual person. So photography, videography. And I realized that we only see one dimension of people, especially on Instagram, social
Hmm.
media. It's like, who are you? Great. You have a beautiful photo, a filter, whatever you want to do with your life. That's cool. But who are you as a person within you? And I think that's what interests me and it always has. And I think I said, let's start talking to people. Obviously, wherever I knew at first in Calgary, we slowly expanded across Canada. And and during this time, I've realized I wasn't alone in a lot of things.
Hmm.
It didn't matter who they were. It's what you're made of. It's, the substance, how many hits you take and how you get back up in life. And I thought that was admirable in many individuals, got inspired. And actually, I looked it up the other day. So May 2021, I registered the name mental.ca.
Hmm.
But for a long time, I mean, till June, I couldn't find the courage to speak. Again, there's that stigma where you're thinking, I don't know, are we gonna lose jobs? Are people gonna start wondering, is that crazy?
Hmm.
But you get to a point in life where you don't care anymore.
Right.
You just the purpose is higher than yourself. And I think when you reach that in life, there's this different level of peace.
Right.
And then there's folks like yourself and individuals that said, you know what? We got your back on this. Like, you got this. I said, what if I fall? What if I trip? Get back up.
Yeah.
And it was nerve wracking, but there's a group that helped push this forward. And I think when you start having a team with you, I think you can get some good things done. But you need the right people around you that believe in you and vice versa, right? Respect, mutual respect.
Yeah. 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 I hear you. And very similar to yourself, as you mentioned. I do want to explore that a little bit more, especially with the podcast. Like I kind of started this podcast during the pandemic as well for very similar reasons. I think for me, the motivation started around sharing the mental health journey of others and how can we connect on that front. Very similar. Like it was tough during the pandemic to be able to have these conversations openly. You couldn't really sit down with people, but that podcast allowed me to do that. And I found I was able to build a lot of connections through that because there's so many people who are silently struggling or just looking for a venue to be able to share. And that's obviously allowed me to expand beyond the podcast, being part of men's groups, initiating a men's group here in Calgary with a friend. So it's led to other things. And, like you said, once you kind of start taking steps in that direction, you start meeting other people who are on a similar journey or who are looking for something similar, but just don't have either the courage or don't know how to take that first step. And you can bring a lot of people along with you. For yourself, like why did you name the podcast Canadian Podcast? Like what was the drive behind that?
Well, I think at first, as a marketer, you start looking at things and you think, well, I am in Canada. I was born in Tanzania, East Africa. Came to Calgary at a young age, 4 months old, and Canada gave us an opportunity to do something with our lives and whatever it may be. Uh, your parents do so much for you and do the best they can with what they have when they come
Right.
here. And I think like they got up from that another country, continent, and came here and gave us this opportunity. We can't just sit around. We have to do things. And I found a love for this country, and I always have. So why not call it Canadian podcast? Why not celebrate Canadians? Why not showcase people? Yes, we always highlight the Rockies and the prairies and the sunsets we have, but what about the Canadians that live here? And Canadians are people from all over the world.
Right.
And that's what I love about it, the diverse culture.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I agree with you. I think that sentiment about, like I've mentioned this before, but I often look at, my parents also immigrated to Canada, and I look at the opportunities I've been able to get because of that. And then I look at some of my cousins who are still in Pakistan, and, they would do anything to have similar opportunities. So as a way of being grateful, but also think it's my responsibility to be able to do something with the opportunities I've been given and try to give back. Right. And that's part of the reason why I'm passionate about the mental health space and trying to support other men, because I feel like it's almost a duty to build that community and support each other. And that kind of feeds into, the work around mental and just, you mentioned that you registered the name a couple years ago, and it's taken you a while, but now that you've kind of started doing more with it and you're showcasing other people and the stories of others, how are you feeling about this whole initiative?
It's similar to the podcast feeling. Was nervous to start it, but it's one great big virtual hug.
Yeah.
Um, in the law enforcement groups out there, they say, we got your 6, which is 6 o'clock, you're back. And I truly feel I have others' backs and they have my back. And you had my back. You were there. You
Yeah.
showed up. And people are learning from each other. For there's sometimes laundry out and a week will go by and I can't get it done. And it's one of those minuscule tasks. But some guy said, start small. Those are your micro wins. And he said that on mental. So I thought, you know what? Okay, I got this. I got this. Because you're always focused on some of the bigger things. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. But what about the little details in life? And if you
Mhm.
put those together, they become big. So it's been interesting to learn from others and apply it in my life. And it's only been a month, but what a great way to start conversations. And what I admire about the folks out there are most of these people would not show up on social media and make videos and do these things. You see veterans out there and most often they like to be in the shadows. But for
Mhm.
them to step up and say, hey, you know what? This is what you can do for your mental health. This is
Right.
what I do for my mental health. And what was great about all this is I said, how can we launch this without going too dark on people?
Right.
Like, of course, this is a start to a conversation, not the conversation. Um, when I looked at it all, I said, okay, there's ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. How did that work? Well, when it comes to mental health, you can't nominate people publicly and say, I nominate you to speak up. It's everybody's journey. Everybody has their own time. And for
Right.
years, I would hide behind liquor and a veil, a mask, somebody who I wasn't. I think when you become your true self, you're free. There's some peace in it. And there's no, they say you should have a little bit of ego, but I don't think, what is it? Where complacency went above and beyond the ego. You got to be
Mhm.
complacent in life. And that's where confidence comes in. I wasn't complacent. I wasn't at peace. I wasn't at understanding with myself. I was running away from myself. I think about this whole journey. Um, August 2019, August 7th, my mom had passed away. She had just turned 55. And yeah, it messed with me. It obviously, moms are moms and there are pillars in
Yeah,
our lives.
of
And
course.
when she's gone, you think, well, what's the world going to be? And then a few months later, you get hit with the pandemic, 2020, and you're thinking, is that world coming to an end? And
Yeah.
and then obviously you're like I said, I was living alone, so I keep going out and I keep going out, and you start going to these bars and you start sitting next to these guys every day, day after day, and then it started becoming earlier in the day, and I'm thinking there's something wrong with me. And the people that are going to these bars are in their 60s and 70s, and nothing wrong with them, but I was becoming that guy I always said I didn't want to be. And that's where resentment comes in. That's where misery comes in. So, the guy that'll walk in, kind of grunting a little meh, and then just goes and stares at the TV and drinks his beer by himself, gets drunk, and then goes home every night. That became me. Like, that's not life.
Yeah.
That's not peace.
Right.
One day I woke up after a night of drinking where I was done with life. I was like, man, I'm throwing the towel. Mom's gone. I have my dog, but what else? Like, I have, of course, a family, but just couldn't get out of my own head. It was just a cycle going down. There was nothing happening for me. And now I was like, I'm over life. Yeah, I'm happy I'm here today. But, I woke up and I was on the floor and I said, holy shit, what the hell happened? Yeah, I went online because, again, there's no, where do you go? Where do you start? There's no therapist out there. I don't know who to call, where to look. So I went on these Zoom meetings. I've never been on a AA meeting, and I went on one, and that's again before the podcast started. And I got to listen to people, and I did that day after day, night after night. And that morning I had woken up, I stopped drinking, and I haven't touched it since. So November 25th this year will be 3 years, and I'm happy with myself on that. Those again micro wins. Uh,
Right.
the stories you hear and you think, holy shit, that would have been me.
Mhm.
And I realized I had a tribe there that I never knew existed. I said, wow, I was that person. And yeah, we still communicate here and there, friends from there. And, it was a precious time. But it was a time in the pandemic. And Furkhan, I think you can agree with starting your podcast is we had choices. We had a choice to yell, scream, be angry at the world and say, screw this, we're in lockdown, blah, blah, blah. Or you can look at it as a gift. I mean, as crappy as it sounds, it's like, let's go within ourselves. Let's go within the infrastructure. Who is around me? What am I doing in my life?
Yeah.
And start that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all that. I appreciate it very much. And I agree with you, right? There were times where it was frustrating. I think for me, the struggle was, yeah, I am a social person. And, I think the biggest struggle was around not being able to go to the gym and exercise. But to your point, I also looked at it, okay, there's a choice here. I've got all this extra time. I can choose to waste it away or I could do something with it, right? And I found my passion for reading again, and then I started a new hobby, which was the podcasting, which allowed me to meet other like-minded people, not only in Calgary but across the world. There's so many people who are in the same space who are having similar challenges, and we were able to come together in a way and talk about these things. But yeah, I mean, a lot of what you shared about your story resonates with me. And I think one of the things I've been able to not only recognize and take stock of, okay, what are the choices I'm making in my life? Because even after the podcast, I was still, what, looking back, making poor choices. But then realizing at some point, okay, well, which ones are serving me and which ones aren't, and which ones do I want to keep making? And sometimes you kind of accept that, okay, this is my reality right now, and I'm not going to judge it, but I know something needs to change. I'm just not ready to change it yet. And that's okay too, because I think a lot of the times we get caught up in the shame and the guilt, and that just creates a downward spiral and doesn't really help. But just kind of motivating myself to move forward and make those changes. I think the biggest piece I've realized through it all is there's this need for connection, right? And for me, I was outsourcing that need, and it always felt empty because nobody can give me enough to make me feel whole. And the biggest thing I realized, and what the pandemic also allowed me to do, was at least the latter half part of it, was to go inward and find that need for connection inside of me. And I think that's, to your point, that's where I was able to experience the most peace, because whatever I was seeking has always been here. I'm not going to find it outside. And I think through our experiences in life, we all learn different coping mechanisms, or we tend to outsource that need, and we're just in that constant chase. And unfortunately, it's like I said, it's just an endless pursuit until you're able to bring it back all here.
Did you find coming out of the pandemic, you were an introvert?
Yeah.
I did as well.
Well, I think I moved. I, I think, I've always been close to the center, but more on the extroverted side. And I think early on in the pandemic, I was going even further on the extroverted side because I was trying to compensate for a lot of it. And then as I kind of started to, like I said, go inward and spend that quality time that I needed for myself, I did shift. And I would say now, yes, I'm more on the introverted side. I still enjoy my
Of course.
time socializing, but yes, I agree with you. Now it's strange because most of the time, like very similar to yourself, like I don't go to the bars anymore. And even if I'm out, maybe going to a bar to see friends,
Oh,
if it's a
yeah.
get together, after an hour, I'm just like, I'd rather go home and energize or read a book. And that was never the case for me before.
Yes. And it's funny because I think because we're always on our phones and our computers, I'm not a TV person
Right.
anymore. I love movies, but even then, I just can't do it anymore. It doesn't feed me. I like documentaries and like watching YouTube shows and stuff. Other than that, I'll just pick up a book, pick up a podcast, and just go to town. And
Yeah.
I learn so much more, and I learn at my own pace, which is amazing. What did the pendulum swing, or how did it swing for you exactly when you made a switch and said, "Uh, I need to go within myself. Love is in here, peace is in here, not out there." When did you realize that? And how did you realize that?
I think for me, it was, I've shared this story in other platforms, but, I had a second failed relationship. So came out of a divorce, jumped into another relationship. Then that failed during the pandemic. Then I was you know, just outsourcing that need for connection because I just wasn't ready to look inward. To your point earlier, wearing different masks, just chasing, chasing, chasing. And it just got exhausting. I had several embarrassing moments
Yep.
where I wasn't proud of the choices I was making. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is enough. Like, it was almost like the adult within me finally woke up and it was like, okay, I'm taking charge here for a bit. So yeah, I went on this, it was like November 2021. And I was like, okay, I'm going to, be a bit responsible here, focus on my sleep. And I gave myself a 2-week window. I was like, okay, just take a break from all of this nonsense and just do this. Actually, it was a week. And then as the week was approaching, I was like, okay, let's extend this to 2. and I was sleeping well, I was eating well, I was exercising on a regular basis again. And I just started feeling great just in a matter of 10 days. So I'm like, why would I not keep doing this? And then as I kept sticking with it, it became a habit. And then I just kept, stacking different habits on top and top, and I'm feeling great. And I finally started looking at it, and I was mentioning this to my parents yesterday too. I came to the realization that I'm at an age now that for me, it's important not to live for myself anymore. I have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to serve others. And if I want to do that, then these are the things I need to do. And like I said, is the best way I can explain it is like, it was almost like, okay, I'm growing up here. It's time to grow up.
I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but they say boys grow up later and age later than women in terms of
Yeah.
maturity. Yeah, I had to grow up. And you know what? I've realized through this whole thing, and I have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
When I look back at my younger self, just again, before the pandemic, I was a different person. You think, good gosh, the things you did, the things you said, uh, not just to yourself, but to others. And I wasn't a happy person. That it's energy that was radiated out of it. And then you realize, who's around you, who's in your circle. Not saying the old circles were bad. It's just
Right.
not my circle anymore. You know? Times have changed. I'm chasing different things. Chasing, and I would say maintaining. Right? That's the other
Right.
thing. You're not constantly going after something. Now it's also grateful for me today. I'm happier today than I've ever been because of knowing I'm not alone. There's people like yourself out there, people on Mentel. And on the Canadian podcast, I've just said, this is who I am. Like, oh, so
Mm,
you can speak about that stuff? All right. Well, I can too then.
yeah.
And that's what you want. You want people to share things and come out of the shadows. What was one thing that you did for yourself that you're proud in terms of chasing peace?
If I had to narrow it down to one, um, I think you kind of alluded to it here just now, but just being in acceptance of who I was, right? So I know that sounds cliche, so I'll expand on that a little bit. But I think it came to the point that if I'm going to keep hiding this part of myself or wear a mask, I'm never going to fully heal, right? And I think part of it is most of us end up, and this is why I have compassion and empathy for others on their journey too, because I've been there, and for me, I wasn't willing to accept parts of myself, and until I didn't break those barriers and just fully accept everything and be like, okay, these are parts of myself that I'm going to accept, but then it's almost like the Jungian work where it's like you're integrating that shadow. And that's what I had to do, and recognize that, okay, I'm not that person anymore. I can choose who I want to be. That's all in my control. I can't let the environment dictate that for me. How can I take my power back? And that's when I started feeling more like that I had more agency. I had more freedom than I thought. And it was almost like this. The best way I can explain it is like when you watch superhero movies where they finally are able to recognize their ego and how it's been holding them back. That's when they become like super responsible with their superpower, right? That's when they're at their best. And that typically happens at the end of the movie because that's when they defeat the villain. And, if you kind of look at it, it's interesting. The villain is also, uh, um, it's part of their past, right? There's something in the villain in the movie that's triggering their past. And that's what it was like for me. There was these things, these relationships I was creating, the people I was surrounding with, the choices I was making, all continued to trigger my past. And it was just one cycle. Past would be triggered. I'd repeat the same behavior. I'd go through that shame spiral and then rinse and repeat. Right.
I've been there.
And yeah, so I think that was it. Integrating all of that and then recognizing that, okay, I've accepted my past. I'm going to love myself for everything I went through. I needed to go through that for my journey. And here I am today. And today I get to make a choice.
But you don't get love if you don't feel pain. You don't see light if you don't see darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said with
Absolutely.
the union thing is you got to open that trunk and go in. But
Right.
how do you do it? Because it is scary. You
Mm-hmm.
think, God, I can just keep shoving that stuff in, that shadow, and it follows us, like we all know. But opening it, going in, did you go head in at one time in your life where you're like, I'm just going to do it. I got all this. I can control. I'll take care of it all right now. Or do you have to be gentle with yourself when you start picking things up to deal with? And then there's that monkey on your shoulder, like the imposter syndrome. Well,
Right.
you're like, yeah, I can do this. I can face this. I can break that barrier. And then that monkey, that voice. Well, no, you can't. You did that. You can't.
Right.
So how do you, as a human being, and again, this is all in here. This is not out there
Right.
yet. We don't know. It's here. How do you tell that
Yeah.
voice? How do you silence that voice to say, I got this. You can't tell me what to do.
Yeah. 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 It's a process, right? I think um you're gonna have your days, right? And this is what I try to explain to my clients too when they're trying to learn new ways of coping. I'm like, you're not gonna get it right. You're probably gonna get 50% of it right, maybe if you're lucky the first time. But with anything you're learning, you have to keep at it, right? And it requires you to practice and it requires you to make mistakes because even those mistakes are lessons that you can use for the next time, right? So, and when you think about it, it's like if you're trying to learn a new habit, it's going to take you time, right? It's not going to be second nature until you do it consistently for a long time. And I was just reading about a research study here where they found a correlation between exercise and insomnia. And basically, people weren't seeing results within a week or 2 weeks of exercising. So basically, what the research found was people that exercise can then fall asleep, but they had to do it for 16 weeks consistently before they saw the result,
Or most
right?
won't go to that
So
16-week mark.
exactly. So that's the thing, right? We tend to like try something new, and if we don't see the results, we're like, oh, this isn't gonna work for me. I'm not that type of person. There's other people who can do it, but not me. This isn't for me,
Mhm.
right? And that's the thing, right? That's
Or what about the opposite? I can do it all. Is that right as well?
well, that too, right? That's a slippery slope as well.
That
I think
is.
you have to. So one of the things I like about goal setting is that whole SMART acronym, right? It's has to be specific, has to be measurable, has to be achievable, um, has to be realistic and timely, right?
Do
So
you
if you're gonna
do you
bite it,
do goal setting and do you do short term in terms of daily, weekly, monthly, and then the long term goals 5 years from now to say what I want to do with my life?
for me, I've realized that the long-term goals don't really serve me because then I find you end up getting too attached to a specific outcome,
And you get
right?
comfortable.
Like a lot of things happen.
There's comfortable comfort in it where you start saying, "Well, I'm in La La Land. Yeah, yeah. Can it be this person in 5 years? It's all good. Let's just book up that trip." For
Yeah,
example,
yeah,
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What I mean, you think about it, right? Like you look out. I mean, I've look back 5 years, and I did not expect myself to be here. I don't think I would have predicted that, or even set a goal for myself in that way. But I think it's good to have some sort of vision for sure that you can work towards. But for me, and this is maybe just specific to me, I find like if I'm able to um, just focus on the short term goals, that allows me to be more present, and then I'm not getting too caught up in something that's far out. Um,
Were you fragile with
so
yourself, or were you hard on yourself to, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear briefly here, but
yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah,
It's
y-
like
yeah,
you had to call yourself out on your own bullshit, in terms of, can't just be, "Oh, we're going to be okay. We're going to get through this." It's like, no, you got to work. Like you're telling yourself this, you got to do this, Zach. You got to do this for you. If you don't do this, who's going to do it? Who's going to save you? No one here.
right,
I mean, for all these years, you've kept these habits. You've been this way. You're going to change because people have told you just for change,
right,
Zach. You didn't listen. I had to do it for
hmm,
myself, right?
yeah,
I had
of
to.
course,
I don't recommend it though in certain ways because I was, looking back, really hard on myself, and that I
hmm,
had to break me, if you know what I mean. You have to break yourself, and if you've heard that quote, it's like rock bottom is a great place to build that foundation that you want to change your life, to start again. We're
yeah,
constantly reinventing ourselves, and I think that itself, I'm grateful for. The dark times,
yeah,
because in the darkness, yeah, you find things you didn't know about yourself, and you learn, you search, because there's no comfort, there's no plan B. This is it. There's no safety net. This is all. This is what
right,
one life we have. For the rest of my life, am I going to be this certain way, or am I going to evolve? What we're talking about today. If we did it a year later, I'm sure we're going to talk about other things that are what we've learned this year.
for sure,
That's what it's about. Um,
yeah,
Stagnancy. That's where that ego starts creeping in or it did for myself, was who I was. And then the ego starts coming over you. It's like, yeah, you're that person. You're that person. And then this all becomes blurred, right? And you're trying to
yeah,
hold on to something because you're like, that's me, but that's not you.
mm,
That was yesterday. That
right,
was a year ago. That was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, right? So who we are today is what matters. Who we are aiming to be tomorrow matters. For yourself, you've started doing cold plunges. I don't know how you do it for some. It's the fear,
like how do
that fear of the shock. What does it do for you that stimulates you? Like, is it like drinking a cup of coffee where you just feel better all of a sudden, awake, sharper? What does it do for you?
yeah. Yeah, I think there definitely on the physiological level, there is that shock that kind of wakes you up. And then the research shows that it's rather than using coffee, but you're using like the cold for the dopamine release, right? But for me, it's also on a mental level. And what I've shared with others is and I'll kind of repeat this, but I do the cold exposure typically in the morning, first thing in the morning. And what I've realized is I'm voluntarily exposing myself to this, right? Like I'm choosing this for myself. So if I can do that and I can come out of it feeling great, and I can like in that moment, the 2 to 3 minutes that I'm in the cold shower,
Mm.
breathe through it and regulate, there's nothing stressful that can hit me during the day. Right. And then I try to caveat that because there could be some
Of
outliers,
course.
right? Something devastating could happen where I need to still be kind to myself and accept that for what it is. But outside of that, you know, I used to be the type of person who let the environment dictate my emotion and how I regulated myself. And regulation was not something I was familiar with, you know, war I'm the type of guy who wears my heart on his sleeve, but I realized at one point, and looking back now too, that, if I want to serve the community and I want to be a leader, I need to be able to show up in a certain way. And I need to be able to be a person that's grounded and who's regulated. And the cold exposures really allowed me to do that. And that's why I think it's a mental thing for me as well, because now I find like when the regular stressors that come up that we all experience throughout the day, I just breathe through it and I'm just way more calm about it. I'm like, okay, this has happened now. I can't really change it. What am I going to do about it now? And whatever I do now is a choice that I have and I get to dictate it, right? I have all the power.
Instead of
So
the external world controlling it, or the environment that you're in control you. It's the other way.
yeah, I can influence my environment. Now, I'm very cautious of how I use the word control, because that can also be uh, irresponsible in a way, right? I think for me, majority of my life, all the chase and pursuit and the outsourcing of love was a way to control, right? In a way, in my head, I was trying to control, but I was out of control.
You think there's a sense of,
And
you go back to your childhood, like something you were missing.
yeah, of course, that's what it is, right? And that's the men I like to work with. I find that's pretty much the same story, right? I mean, the characters are different and, the narrative's slightly different, but at the end of the day, the source is the same. We're all seeking love in different ways because there was something that happened early on, that impacted us. And
We
it comes
found
up.
someone that's ever at peace or has come to that destination where they're comfortable, like truly comfortable within themselves? There's, again, veils and masks. You know, the Japanese say there's three masks we have. One, that
Mm,
we are when we are with ourselves, one with our friends and family, and one who we are with strangers. So who are we? Because there's that word, and you hear it a lot on social media: be authentic, be yourself. But
yeah,
are we really being ourselves? Like, who is Furkhan? Who's Zach? Right?
yeah,
The deeper meaning.
yeah. Well, yeah, for me, I kind of look at it. I've started looking at that more on a spiritual
Absolutely.
level. For me personally, that's kind of been my journey over the last year. And for me, what comes up when you say that is this whole concept of unity or oneness. And yeah, we're in these bodies, we're different people, but at the soul level, are we different? Right? That's the thing. And I think that's allowed me to have way more peace, because now it does get hard at times because I'm still having the human experience in this world. But
Man, we're
when
human
I take it,
beings. Right? We're being.
yes, correct. Yeah. Yeah. But when I take that step back and, I look at you or anyone else I meet, I'm like, there's a part of me in this person. And I had this other guest on my podcast, and she said it beautifully. It's like, we're all breathing the same air, right? And we're breathing the same air that our ancestors were breathing, right? It's when you start thinking of it, that's crazy, right? There's a part of us in everyone, right? And there's something you and I share that's in common, right? Like that we, on a fundamental level, part of you that I can see in myself.
Well, on a Saturday morning,
So
we're here together, you know?
yeah,
Most people
exactly.
would say no.
So
I mean, if you asked me a few years ago, well, I wouldn't have done this, but I wouldn't even be up at this time.
yeah, same here, right? I'd be like 7 in the morning,
Yeah,
no
good
way.
luck.
Especially on a Saturday. Yeah. No, I hear, and that's the thing, right? So it's to answer your question, who are we or who am I? Who are you? Doesn't matter. Like, why do we need to define that? And
Yeah.
that to me, again, I I'm able to relate that to spirituality and the connection I've been able to build
Well, this is just a shell. This is
with
just a
clients.
capsule. This it's gone.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what we look like. It's who you are, what you're doing, because that soul lives on, and I truly believe that. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
I always see the numbers
Why do you believe that?
11, which means you're on a parallel path in life. I see
Yeah.
that a lot, and I think
Yeah.
about my mom because she passed away on 11 a.m. So I'm thinking, oh, no, mom, you're around, but you got to find connection. Maybe not, but it's for me, it works. For me, it brings me peace. So hold on to
Right.
those moments, right?
Yeah.
The things that make you happy, hold
Right.
on to them. Don't let them go. And then there's also the fact that stop searching. Sometimes just stay within that area for a bit, for a minute or two. Enjoy it. Is that
Yeah.
we're constantly stimulated. I mean, especially with our phones. Like you go on Instagram, you're like, whoa, God, I got to make my podcast a little better. I got to do this. So I should talk to this person. Or it's like, enough. You're enough. We're enough.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
when you look at therapy and what you do for men, do you mind elaborating exactly what you do and how you got interested in that topic specific? You're like, Zach, you're on my podcast.
I know. I know. I like. I feel like I'm the one talking a lot here, and I really wanted you to talk, but yeah, I'll definitely share that.
And by the way, you
Yeah,
have to come on my
people.
podcast when you have a minute. It'd be lovely to.
I will, of course, I'd be honored. I think for me, what I realized is, and again, I'm not picking one gender over the other, but as a man, I could relate to other men, and going through a divorce really woke me up. Right? It was like, okay, there's a part of me that had become arrogant, ungrateful, and judgmental, and all those shells started breaking
This is
apart
during the
going through a
divorce or
divorce.
after the divorce.
It was a bit of a bit of both, right? I think during it for sure, I was like, okay, well, I guess, and the main thing was the whole notion of failure, a failed marriage, and then that really made me question the arrogant self, the ungrateful self, the judgmental
Were
self.
you fearful of
Hey,
the thoughts and opinions of others around you, especially in our cultures? Like,
yeah,
oh my God,
absolutely,
what's Auntie
100%.
gonna think?
It was all of it.
Great. Yeah. It's a good, no,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
true
yeah,
though.
yeah,
It is. Yeah. Oh man.
yeah. What I think,
Hey, right.
yeah,
Hey,
that was
the shame in that. The stigma. It's a
yep,
stigma. It's true.
yep. It is. And as I was working through it and realizing that at one point I had to again accept myself for who I was, and I'm like, this is my reality. I can't change it. I can't run from it. I can't hide it. I need to accept it.
Right.
And the more I started accepting it, the easier it got. It was less painful. It was, again, I've said this a few times, but it allowed me to recognize how much control I was giving away and how much I can influence my environment rather than letting the environment control me. And through that process, I realized that there's so many men who are struggling in similar ways, right? And for them, maybe it's not a divorce or a failed relationship. There's other things. There's so many other things for men. But how can I be an advocate? How can I start? And maybe it wasn't being an advocate in the beginning. It was more like, okay, how can I start having these conversations, right? Like what we're having right now. In the beginning for me, it was like nerve wracking for sure. It's like, how can I have these conversations? And I was talking to some of my friends who were willing to be vulnerable. And that's kind of where the idea for the podcast came. I'm like, okay, well, if I'm sitting in a coffee shop or a pub having this conversation with a buddy or an acquaintance, this could easily be a podcast that put out there and people can listen to and relate to, because there's so many people out there who are feeling the same things that I'm feeling or this other person is feeling that's talking to me. And then as I started stepping into that, and going down the path of therapy and then becoming a therapist, what I realized, and I touched on this earlier, is like it all started at childhood for us. There's something in our childhood that started it. And it could have been some small incident with our parent or caregiver, or maybe we were bullied in school, or maybe someone said something to us in passing that stuck with us. But there's always something from childhood that wasn't healed, and we compensate for it. We either seek it out in relationships, we seek it out in our achievements, we seek it out in titles, in trying to become someone that we're not. But that's where it all started. And that's what allowed me to step into this space and support other men.
It's something you learn is you're never alone and you are stronger together. Because at times in my life, no, I got this. I got this. I can do this. You need help and get it. There are people out there. And the help often is just a listening ear, an authentic, genuine person that wants the best for you. It's not somebody holding a knife, just waiting for that opportunity. It's someone that's like, no, man, I get you. I was there, or similar situations. Cause at the end of the day, like you said, the stories are very similar, despite the context.
Mm,
If you put it on like a line in a line, you just look through that. You're like, okay, well, overall, this is the human journey
right.
for the rest of our lives, whatever that may be. What kind of a man do you want to be and how do you want to live your life?
Well, I think the biggest piece is holding myself to accountable and being real. So, and by that I mean accepting the fact that I'm flawed, right? I'm going to make mistakes, and I keep saying that. It's not to excuse my behavior, but it's to take the pressure off, right? And I think by accepting that flawed version of myself, I'm hoping that it gives others also the
Mhm.
permission to do it. I think that's the biggest thing. Sometimes we just need that permission, and we're looking outside of ourselves for it. But how can you give it to yourself? And then by giving yourself that permission, then you're able to forgive yourself too, right? When you do fail. And it's like, okay, I failed here, but how can I get back up again and move forward, right? Because um yeah, it's that I think that's the biggest piece. And then I touched on this earlier, is how can I be more compassionate and see that there's parts of us that we're all carrying, right? And that allows us to come together and build that sense of community, especially in today's world where there's such a divide, right? And I think that's where love comes in. And um,
We're so connected, yet we're disconnected. You can go on here and just start
mhm,
talking to everyone, but you can get lost and you're not truly connected anymore. Like you would
right,
meet people in
yeah,
person and go play with them outside and do things. And yeah, I am guilty for that. Just I'd sometimes rather be in my cocoon and be okay with that too. I mean, you need a balance in both, but there's definitely a disconnection.
yeah. Well, I think, to your point, we are all connected through social media or online, the online world, but we're still behind a screen, right? So how's it any different than wearing a mask?
So you know what that means? We'll have to go for a coffee then.
Yeah, I'm down. There's no excuse for us. We're in
Exactly.
Calgary, but yeah, now I do want to ask you a couple of questions, and I'm obviously want to be mindful of your time. I know you've got other plans for today, but
It moved to
where do you
11,
see this
so I'm
whole?
not 10.
Okay,
Goodness.
good. Awesome.
Small town in Alberta.
Yeah,
That's
where
where
do you
I'm
see
going
the
today.
sounds exciting. Sometimes those small town visits are
Oh,
enlightening,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah. And people there. It's fun. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, where do you see this whole mental space or initiative you created? Where do you see it
For sure.
going? Like,
This was the launch. It was almost a pilot to see, are people interested? So I made that first video and I was nervous because I was thinking, oh no, no one's gonna post and it's just gonna be me.
yeah.
Some know this, some don't, but after making that video, I went upstairs and crawled into bed, put the blanket over myself
Mm,
mid-afternoon and said, oh my God, what did I do? Literally, as a grown ass man, you're putting that blanket over your head as a way to protect yourself. And, we're still children at heart, I think. And I think you shouldn't lose that, the
mhm.
youth, the thing that you enjoy doing. So, yeah, it was one big virtual hug, like I said, for all of us. And to see us all come together to support, this is just a start. Now the month's over. Okay. So where do we go from here? And people have asked, where are you going to take this now? Is it going to be a yearly thing? Yes, of course you'd want that to happen and to support it. But what about the other
Right.
11 months? What do we do? Do we
Yeah.
just say sayonara to each other? That's not what this should be about. This should be a movement that we help each other. We encourage each other. We say, hey, you know what? Maybe tell me a book you're reading this month and why. Stimulate those
Right.
conversations. This is not about spreading the darkness of one another. Sure, we recommend in a safe space to do so with people you trust in your circles. But what has worked for you? Tell us that. Like we did this time, right? Activity, tip, mantra, the quote. I think we got to, it blew up bigger than I thought. I thought it would just be Calgary based, but
Yeah.
there are a few others, but it grew a little bit, and I definitely will need the help. So if anybody's interested in helping with this and has ideas, has thoughts, I mean, this is we're all together in this. It's not, oh, here's the way, here's the blueprint. No, this blueprint will change
Right.
and it will evolve because we're human beings. And like I say, men do need to speak up, share.
Yeah.
I would like to see more men from different regions, demographics get out there. And I do want to create some sort of merch or tied to a charity because what I loved about this was how authentic it was and truly
Mhm.
because you see these videos and you see these men, real people. There's no filter there. This is who I am. Own it. And they did. And I loved it. I mean, so some gentleman yesterday talking about how he had taken a beating, like beats. Thought that was neat. That's an interesting crap.
Yeah.
Another individual was talking about wrestling and he wore his outfit. And I thought, right on, man. Like, you never see that. So good for you. Like that
Right.
made me happy. And times I think, oh, well, if he can do that, I can do that. I can push further. Hope. We give each
Right.
other hope, but it's through speaking up, starting, taking the action day one or one day,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And what I hear in that too is based on what you've shared is where it gives everyone an opportunity to embrace their uniqueness, right? And I think that's where we often lose connection is because we worry about being too different.
Yeah.
So to your point here, like people are showing up as who they are and talking about the exact same thing, right? And that is kind of been the theme of what we've been talking about so far over the past hour is finding that commonality.
It's working.
and
Yeah,
often we lose sight of it
exactly.
because of the physical
Yeah. And
differences.
oftentimes, we're the, or I look back in my life and say, I was the black sheep in many cases. I try to
Mhm.
fit in. I put the masks on that were me to fit into rooms that I didn't belong in. Not saying they're bad rooms. They're just not my people, my rooms that got me and I understood them. I have a hard time now talking just about the weather and surface conversations. I mean, I can do it, but life, there's got to be more. It's depth, it's substance. Who are you? What are you made of? What's your story? And when these individuals are coming out there doing this, it gave me hope, and I'm sure it did for yourself as well. You were out there sharing your stuff, and I'm thinking, holy smokes, put himself out there, like right on. But thank you again.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate you even asking me. So that meant a lot because I think for me, it's almost like if I'm going to be talking the talk, I have to walk it too, right? And that's how I remind myself that yeah, I can be doing this podcast behind a screen or making posts on Instagram, but none of that means anything unless I'm out there doing the work myself, right? And it's a good way to hold myself accountable. But
If I ask
um
you,
yeah,
what
I
would
think
you do for mental now that the month's over? What would you want to see on there? What do you want?
I don't personally I don't think
No.
anything needs to change because we're struggling through this day in, day out, right? It's not a 1 month endeavor, like you said. It's year round. But it needs to continue talking about what are people doing to support their mental health and how can we continue to share those messages and talk about these things and normalize it, right? And make it a part of our daily living. Like, and you never know, there might be someone there watching who may be like, okay, I want to try this thing because it seems to be working for this person. And you just don't know who might benefit from it, right? And that could happen any
And
moment.
that's using social media for good. I used to host events and parties and all these things, and you're thinking, no, that doesn't serve anybody. It's like, great, nice photo. Or maybe through these messages, we can leave something behind with the use of technology in today's times.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I do have one last question for you, because you did mention, and this is something I've been contemplating a lot because I mean, I believe in it. I just don't know how to articulate it. So I've been formulating stuff, but you said our souls live on forever, earlier. And, you obviously shared the loss of your mom. Why do you believe that? Like, why do you believe that's the case?
But for myself personally, and I can only speak for myself, it's in adversity and moments of darkness, there's got to be something greater than you. You're not the
Hmm.
end all be all. And I speak to my mom. It sounds different, but I do that. And, you know, I often need guidance from an angel up above. And before she passed, she gave me an owl, right? That's looking at me, like, because owls are always there, and an eagle.
Yeah.
And the eagle is to showcase fly, fly, spread your wings, son. Like, go for it in life. And
Mm,
mom's not here, but she's always here with you. And I have videos of her saying that
yeah.
to me and all these things. So if I can hold on to certain things like that and to speak with her, and it brings me comfort, it brings me peace. And oftentimes it brings me the answer I need. Because yes,
Hmm.
there's gut instinct, but there's got to be something about that, even from myself.
Yeah.
There's someone watching over.
Right.
Oh, maybe, you know, you got that red light, but maybe it saved you down from an accident down that day. Right. There's
Yeah.
moments, there's blocks for reasons. Um, don't don't over stress yourself on that. Like, take that as a blessing too. Right. Something you wanted to happen didn't happen. Okay, sucks, but pivot, move on, head up.
Right.
And, this is something someone gave me and it says, do your best. And I think that's what it's about, right? We get up every day, do our best. And sometimes just doing nothing is the best. Do nothing. Seize the day. Carpe diem. Right.
Mhm. Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
you? Do you believe the soul lives
Yeah.
on?
No,
Do you
thank
believe there's angels out there or whatever you want to call them?
I believe, yeah, absolutely. I believe the soul lives on. And I think my relationship with my son has reinforced that because I don't get to see him a whole lot. But I was reading this book by Mo Gaudat. It's called Solve for Happy, and he talks about the loss of his son. And that also inspired me. And I think, for me, it comes back to, as you shared the relationship you have with your mom, and we we're in this world, and we have these amazing relationships with our parents, our loved ones, our ex-partners, our children. And to me, I'm like, it it doesn't make sense that it would just end, right? Like you leave this world and that's it. There's
Mm.
I feel like all those people are waiting for each other on the other side. And that, maybe it's wishful thinking, or maybe I'm like too, um, I could be wrong. I don't know.
Or you're
But
right,
that's the beauty
because
of
I
it.
do think that as well. One day when we're up there, if it's a field and it's sunny out there, I just want to see my grandpa and my mom and give her the biggest hug and tell her a little bit about life.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for the tools she gave me in my life. She was
Hmm.
an entrepreneur, and if you can find ways to honor your loved ones, do so. So I have like her desk is beside my desk with her computer still on it and
Yeah.
everything, her purse next to it. And I just look over sometimes and I think, oh, what do I do in this situation? How do I deal with this in life? I mean, you just remember a moment where that person helped you. Um, and I think that's what life is about is you remember the people who are good to you and good for you and wanted the best for you and like
Absolutely.
not um, put you into hard times, but got you out of them or give you the tools and tips. There's a lot of papers on my desk with her handwriting. And I think, oh, what did mom say again? Let's go through it. I have this book
Right.
that she gave me
Yeah. Yeah.
5 years ago. No, sorry, maybe about 8, 9 years ago. And it says, where will you be in 5 years? I still haven't been able to write in there and complete it because I don't know what I'm going to do. Like kind of that earlier conversation, long
Yeah.
term goals. You make something up. But do you really want to be there in 5 years? No. I mean, when we were younger and we said, where would you be in 5 years? And you're like, yeah, I want to be in that like Escalade with spinners on it or something, what I mean? Listening to 50
Yeah.
Cent. I don't know.
Yeah.
Something interesting like that. Again, it's like phases
Eh,
and stages of our life, right? Where we are at today. In 5 years, we don't know what we'll be. Obviously on this,
mhm.
but
Yeah.
and definitely in this on this path in 5 years, hopefully we can cheers each other and say, you know what? Look, we're growing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I agree with you. And I think for me, whether or not, I I mean, obviously we don't know for sure, but that's kind of the beauty of it, right? The mystery of not knowing completely what happens. I kind of like that because if we had the answers, then there'd really be no challenge, right? There'd be certainty, and the not knowing is kind of cool, but at the same time, to your point, it if you recognize the beautiful relationships you forge in this world and you honor them, uh, it at least for me, it drives me to be a better person, to know that, okay, if there's an opportunity to meet all these people that I love on the other side, then I got to do my part to make sure. right? And for me, that's what inspires me and motivates me is, okay, if I can do my part, then I get to
And
see
bro,
it.
are you at peace with yourself right now? Like, have you made peace with the past, or is it a journey, a daily journey? You know, because flashbacks and moments in time.
For the most part, I would
Yeah.
say yes, I have, but occasionally the wounds come up. They don't. Sometimes they never fully heal, but even those are opportunities to be kind to myself, and sometimes it's an opportunity to forgive again, forgive myself, forgive others. But that's the journey, like you said, right? It is for me, it's a journey of forgiveness, of humility, of gratitude, and without the three, you don't have that
You
human
know, when you look
experience.
back at your younger self or moments in time where you felt shame or embarrassment, a lot of that was projections, wasn't it? What we did, the actions.
Mhm.
Jeez, you did that? Clearly, you weren't full inside here. All we can do is work on ourselves.
Right.
And yeah, we're not alone in this.
No, no, it starts with ourselves. And that's the biggest thing I like to remind myself. If I'm doing my part, if I'm looking at myself, and if everyone else is doing the same, then we're going to be
If
fine.
there's any suggestions or ideas or thoughts you have for Mental or as your listeners do, yeah, let's talk. Let's get this going.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great initiative. Let's keep talking for sure. And that kind of leads me to, just to tie it all together, like for people that do want to find you or get a hold of you and share ideas or be part of this initiative, what are
For
some
sure.
ways
They
they
can
can
go
do that?
to at mental.ca on Instagram, or they can go to mental.ca on Google or Safari and just click contact button right there. Reach out or DM us. And, we're always looking at critical feedback and saying, hey, what can we do better? And how do we continue this? Because this is not, like you said, a 1 month initiative. This can't be. We gotta own it. We keep saying, "Oh, it can't be 1 month," or men need to talk. Well, sayonara. Thanks everyone for talking. See you next year. Can't happen. This has got to keep going. Um, and if we can keep that message
Yeah,
simple, share a quote, share an activity, or something that's good for your well-being. It's simple yet it's powerful because it also gives hope within that.
right.
It gives learning, understanding.
Yep,
We grow through what we go through together.
absolutely. And it could be more than one thing, right? It could, like for me, when you say a quote or activity, I'm like, oh yeah, there's so many things that I have to do for my
And
mental
please,
health, and
don't just do it
there's
one
nothing
time.
wrong.
You know, you might be,
Right.
you saw a quote you like, send it over. Take a picture of it. Don't always have to
Yeah.
talk, maybe type. Because again, everyone deals with things different. But we still want people
Mhm.
engaged in the conversation. That's the goal. It's not about, oh, we need you to talk and you have to make a video of yourself. Maybe people are not ready. We're at stages in our lives. And some are here, some are here. It doesn't matter. But we're all moving. Yeah. We're a tribe.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. And I want to thank you for coming on here, for being vulnerable, for sharing your story, and for the work you're doing. Thank you so much. Thank you for making me a part of it and asking me to be able to, giving me the opportunity to share. So I'm super grateful for that. And yes, I would, love to grab coffee and talk more and see what I can do to support your mission and how
And
I
it's not
can
my mission, it's our
continue to
mission.
be a part of it.
Let's just say that. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for this
Yes.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Yeah,
this
really
platform.
did.
And yeah, shout out to Easy Conversations. Thanks, bro.
Thank you.
Thank you for checking out this episode with Zach. As always, please leave a review or comments in the comment section. I love hearing from all of you. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do so. That's the best and easiest way to support this podcast. Thank you again, and until next week.